22nd day, January 2024. So these first year I haven't screwed up. Knock on wood. I'm Dana Durnford, the nuclearproctologist.org. And we do forensic investigative journalism against despicable nuclear industry. Hello, despicable nuclear industry. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589, the big 4406. Any old time. Consider clicking buttons and stuff. Get out there and let the nuclear industry know you exist. We're on YouTube, I apologize. YouTube, scumbag YouTube, aka United Nations. Oh, the United Nations, how are you? Hey, ow! Get the hell out of here, you creepy flying creep. E equals MC stupid. When I say stupid, I definitely mean stupid. Stupid is. How come they didn't go back to the moon for 45 years? Anybody? Anybody? Giggity, giggity. Let's ask the superheroes like Spider-Man and the Hulk to go in and fix Fukushima and all the other nightmares they created. Oh, that's right, too. They're just fictional cartoons. Created by the nuclear industry so your children wouldn't see you or your loved ones or your parents or your grandparents as heroes. They got so many superheroes that not even Dana can compete with them. They got them coming out of the woodwork. It doesn't even stop there. The word hero doesn't even exist. You got GoPro Hero and the Stupid of Stupid Guitar Hero, which is a stupid game because the real one for teaching guitar actually exists. In the old days, we used to get rid of our problems. Not sure if you're aware of that. Current generation seems to be asleep at the wheel the whole time. In the old days, we got rid of our problems. Guess what we had? No problems. We got rid of it. Now we got to wait for some superhero to show up. And it'll never be a journalist, I can guarantee you. We got a poll tonight. Would the Japan and the evil UN, aka United International Atomic Energy Agency, hide a nuclear fuel pool meltdown again? I'll show you a poll in a second. This is ABC Cecilia Vega, which is in the press club right now for the White House. Scumbag CNN goes without saying. BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes. So ABC's the biggest in Australia. BBC's the biggest in United Kingdom. CBS is the biggest in United States. In many ways, Canada. They're pretending they're in a building that don't exist, Reactor 4. And so that's why you see this poll tonight. Would Japan and the evil, despicable, disgusting, sadistic UN, the International Atomic Energy Agency, hide a nuclear fuel pool meltdown again? We are already clicking along at 22. Absolutely, positively, yes, man. So this is a frame for a Kevlar sarcophagus for a round number 1 reactor. And this part right there is taller than the stump of reactor 3 or reactor 4. The fuel pools were at the very top of the buildings. And guess where they're not? In the case of reactor 1, of course, that detonated. We have footage of it detonating it. And reactor 2, we don't have footage for some reason. It was right alongside of reactor 1. They put this Kevlar sarcophagus around it so you couldn't see what was going on. really holds no purpose. It becomes a smokehouse for radiation. Reactor 3, watch this nightmare. What you're going to see is big chunks falling back down to Earth really quick. Here we go. Once it stops going up, that's the fuel pools in the reactor cores from the building to your right originally. And ultimately, reactor 3 to your left is what's left of these tall buildings. So how come we got footage of reactor 1 and reactor 3, but we don't have footage of reactor 4 to your left? Could it be because if they gave you footage, then you wouldn't be able to pretend that they're in the reactor? Fuel pool that doesn't exist anymore? And that is your journalists. Your journalists have sold you out for a paycheck and your future and your loved ones and your children's future and the 8 million species. Just to support the poll tonight, I'm going to play just 4 little short clips, about 40 seconds altogether, of the media claiming they're in a building that don't exist. Quite unique.
Flag standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
And so clearly they're not in the fuel pool. So when I ask you, by the way, hi everybody. When I ask you, would Japan and the scum, degenerate, evil UN who covered up Reactor 4 from the International Atomic Energy Agency hide a nuclear fuel pool meltdown again? That, my friends, is exactly the question. The plume covered the entire planet in this model in 9 days. We're talking about 1 million to 10 million atoms in this particular model from France's government of cesium-137 after... this model is 20 days. So just to be clear about what we're talking about, the fuel pools at the very top of these 190-foot, 65-meter, 19-story buildings. The building doesn't exist anymore. So every academic in the nuclear industry that's seen the picture to your left knew the fuel pools were gone and the reactor cores and didn't tell you. So if you got a loved one, a family member in particular, that is a nuclear scientist, you should feel free to kick the shit out of them next time you see them for me, because they have now compromised the integrity of the species permanently. Science outweighs irrational reasoning. There's one you might want to start off with if that's your brother or your aunt or your uncle. It's a South Korean professor named Young Jung-il. And he's a professor at the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering, Dana. You're smarter than you, Dana. He says that nothing got out of these reactors, and what did get out was equal to 2.2 grams of tritium, which is important coming up in a minute. Remember the word tritium. The discharge is like throwing 3 grams of sugar cubes into the ocean. So nuclear meltdowns, multiple nuclear meltdowns, something we've never seen in history, with about 20 reactor cores in the fuel pools at the top of both of those buildings, is equal to 3 grams of sugar. I can honestly say he should be sentenced to death, and it should be death by eating sugar. That's all he gets. He has to eat it all day till he dies. And so should the people in the university who let him get away with that. 3 grams of sugar, that explains why he picked up 30 million one-ton bags and that the food was banned in 14 prefectures for over a decade, I guess. there's 150,000 people within 30 kilometers of the Shika nuclear power plant. 150,000 people. So do you think that they might fake the fuel pool? You think there's a possibility that they would do that again? Because they've already done it. So if they'd already done it, then what's the chances they would do it again? Does that sound silly? Does that sound silly? Just bear with me. I lost my way here. We'll get there. Don't worry. Be crazy. Oh, that's not what we wanted. Let's do this then. I'll get my way.
That's the last time you'll slap your willy around.
The willy. I agree. I concur. Stop fooling around, Dana. Get on with the show. I'm sorry. It happens. It happens. Let's get after it. We got lots of great stories tonight, by the way. Fantastic stories. Danny can stop frigging around long enough and get after it. Alrighty, I'm ready. Sometimes it takes a little bit for me to get it to come together. Because you got to tell certain stories. Oh. Where's the headline for that story? I grabbed the wrong screen capture. Duh. Hang on here. Not off such a great start after all, Dana. It's okay. I'll catch up. Bear with me. Here we go. Okay, so pioneering. We needed that one right there to get the story told. Now, so you remember they can't remove the tritium, they say, out of the water. We're going to cover that story coming up later. And they're going to decommission. It'll take until 2040 to break up their first fusion reactor disaster. It ran on tritium, and they say that they can recover the tritium from the water and reuse it for fuel. What does Fukushima say? Well, it can't be removed from the water. So how come the fusion reactor says they can take the tritium out of the water in the middle by baking the middle, but they can't get it out of the water in the middle at Fukushima? Anybody want to answer that question? Nuclear's going backwards. Let's cover that again for a couple of dozen nights to come. As wind and solar enjoy another year of record growth. So nuclear power suffered a net loss in 2023 of 1.7 gigawatts. So almost 2 full nuclear power plants, large ones, went offline. Well, the data, there's only large ones. So yeah, you got me. Okay. Way to go. Someone's paying attention besides me. Whereas renewable capacity additions in 2023 was equal to 620 large nuclear reactors. I call that a curb stomping, if you ask me. And expect next year to be 50% higher than 2022. So 507 gigawatts, there's 260 gigawatts of nuclear worldwide currently. So it almost doubled the total capacity of nuclear and renewables in just 1 year, in just 12 months. And next year is going to swamp it. All right, let's cover some Shika news and nuclear news. Got a whole bunch of nuclear news, Fukushima news to cover. And we're going to start off with the earthquake. That's not it, Dana. Get after it. That's it there, is it? Right there. The fate of Japan's Moon Sniper mission remains unclear after landing due to power issues. Oh, so they're claiming that they're not getting any sunlight. So they show you this rendition, but the reason they're not getting any sunlight is because they're on the dark side of the moon anyway. The panels are only on one side. And unless there's moon people up there, there's no way to get that picture. Nuclear fusion, the answer to the energy crisis in a couple of 100 years. Only problem is there won't be many people left in a couple of 100 years because 80 years of nuclear emissions are already doomed our planet. However, these reactions also need substantial amounts of heat and pressure to take place, and a fusion reactor occurs in a state of matter known as plasma, existing either low pressure or very high pressures. In order to implement nuclear fusion on Earth, we need nuclides to collide with each other at temperatures of over 10 million degrees Celsius. It's actually 150 million degrees Celsius. To enable them to overcome their mutual electrical repulsions and allows them to fuse. But the design they're working on is from 1904 because they can't come up with their own designs. Same with the small modular reactors. They don't have any because they can't come up with their own design. They're working on the old designs, right? To do this, the nuclide must be contained within a limited space to enhance the likelihood of a collision. Like 3 years ago, they said they hit fusion and they got more energy back than they put into it. And so how much more energy did you get back? They didn't double it or something like this. They got more energy back. This was 3 years ago where they said this about nuclear fusion. And it was equal to a 9-volt battery. So at 150 million degrees, how much water can you boil, first off? And at 150 million degrees, how much water can you boil and quantify that you got excess enough electricity to power a 9-volt battery? So they're pretty ridiculous. We mocked them for the whole year for that version of their... Last year, though, they came up, or the year 2022, they said they got enough back to boil 61-liter kettles of water at 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. They still refuse to explain to us how many kettles of water they can boil at 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures, that they can quantify the 60 kettles of water excess assertion. So how can you boil so much water to power 3 million homes and then say that you had extra energy would have boiled another 60 kettles of water? Does that make any sense? Because that's their version, see? And everybody, all the media ran out with it, and everybody started buying shares in the fusion companies. Of course, there's zero possibility fusion's going to... Nuclear is one great big Ponzi scheme. And what they're doing with the uranium stocks right now, which is over $100, because Sprout Physical Uranium Trust, which is just a piece of paper that showed up and bought the physical uranium, created an artificial market. They didn't release it and didn't take possession of it. And so this created, all of a sudden, the mining company had to produce more uranium. So they tricked the investors into thinking that there was a bull market going on. There was a big demand, but there wasn't no big demand. There was a temporary demand to replace the stuff that was bought up and put into storage by a greedy corporation known as Sprout Physical Uranium. But there was another company showed up and done the exact same thing called a Yellow Cake. And they were on the stock market with nothing, just an office, not an office building, but just a little office. And they bought up, through investors that started the company, the rest of the uranium Yellow Cake in the raw form that was sitting on the market. So this created another false impression that there was a boom on for uranium and that the industry was the renaissance. We know now there's no renaissance. It's the complete opposite. But in order now to keep the fable alive a little bit longer and drive the prices up higher, they need investors to buy the shares that they want to sell because they want to make their money before it all collapses. And so they went from 2 years ago from $30 a pound to $106 a pound today. They can't keep the lie up for much longer. And so now you got everybody, all the global medias out there pushing uranium stocks to people that are retired. So you say, put your money there. It's a sure bet. It's going to pay in big time down the road for you. And in about 2 weeks, the whole bottom falls out. And we watched this now for over 12 years since Fukushima, this over and over and over. But now they're running, because reactors are not coming online. Reactors are not being built. Renewable industries curb stomping the nuclear industry in every direction that it looks. And so what they're doing now is they're going for broke. They're going to steal everybody's pensions and fade away into the night, and there's no one out there to hold them accountable, only me and you. You get fed a lot of bullshit in your life, and it's very deadly to everybody else that's on the bottom end of it. So how many suicide bombers does it take to equal an aircraft carrier? Just think about that statement. Because you hear about a suicide bomber, and then you justify that to send in an aircraft carrier and bomb a country into non-existence. So we done the tally one time. We tried to. We started off with how many suicide bombers does it take to equal a military jet with bombs in it? And if it's got a 20-year lifespan, you're talking about thousands a year when there's a war going on. There's a lot of suicide bombers. But if you look at an aircraft carrier or a battleship and try to equate that with suicide bombers, you realize what the really law is all about, don't you? So, for goodness sakes, please don't buy any uranium stocks. And anybody in the nuclear fusion industry that is trying to sell you stocks, try to sue them to protect the other investors. Nuclear fusion and plasma physics research is conducted in more than 50 countries. 50 different scams. Led by the European Union, the USA, and Russia, and the scumbag in Japan. Fusion reactions have been successfully achieved in many experiments without demonstrating a net fusion power gain. And they're referring to the 60 kettles of water I just articulated for you, which is what they got everybody to invest in, not December 2023, but December 2022. It was really despicable. We covered it for several days straight, all this bragging. But when at the first day you didn't get any numbers, on the second day you realized the energy they were talking about that they got back, they said, was equal to 60 kettles of water. You can't quantify that kind of assertion, see? And so they should be boiled in a fusion reactor in the future if we ever get one. A fusion reactor meltdown is very unlikely. First off, at 150 million degrees, if something goes wrong, that's not just going to turn to stardust in a few seconds. That's going to detonate. That's going to send pieces of the reactor 60 or 70 miles. It'll blow up the entire site. The reason that fusion can't work, and I've covered this quite a lot over the years, and sometimes I forget to mention it. There's a reason nuclear fusion reactors can't work, because what the sun does for fusions is it expels emissions like 1 million miles out into space, and it can suck that back in too, right? We can't do that on Earth. And that's why fusion works, is because it has these so-called galaxy big hiccups. And you know how you get the solar storms coming in at 1 million miles a second, right? And faster than the speed of light. At the speed of light. And so what happens is you can't replicate this on Earth. You can't put this in a bottle and switch it on. You can glean a lot out of it, but you can't conquer it because you can't destroy a planet for a reactor. They might, don't get me wrong, they're working on it. So there's many other things they could be up to, dark matter. And who knows what they're really up to, but they know themselves that they can't have a permanent fusion reaction because you can't release the excess energy, basically, is what I'm trying to tell you. When you say 10 million degrees Celsius, it's actually 150 million, 300 million degrees Fahrenheit that the real numbers are. Nuclear fusion has not shown any practical benefits so far. It's a total waste of the most precious metals and resources that we have on the planet that the military hasn't sent up into space already. Idiots. So far, no one has been able to extract more energy than a fusion experiment than they put in. Like, they haven't been able to. The so-called criticality, or the fusion events that we're talking about, are in the milliseconds. And they're putting in more electricity than New York City uses. And putting that in a millionth of a second. And they're trying, like, the whole idea is to scam everybody to invest in them, because otherwise no one's going to invest in them, right? That's what they're up to. Taiwan raised over 17 million donations, and we got another story on fusion coming up later. Taiwan raised over $17 million donations for Japan quakes. You know, Taiwan had to send back, or South Korea had to send back 6 million pounds of radioactive fish in 2013. Taiwan, of course, had a referendum in 2018 to ban food from the Fukushima nuclear prefectures. And then 2 years later, when that referendum ended, instead of having another referendum, politicians shook hands and imported the food in and poisoned everybody in Taiwan. When more than 134,000 donations made to the program, according to the ministry, if they're to be believed, which they're not, the government has offered Japan 405,000 to assist with the disaster. Well, thank goodness, because Japan ain't spending a nickel. And this is in the city of Suzu. I'm assuming what we're looking at is from the tsunami and the earthquake. And Suzu, they estimated, was roughly 4,500 of the homes were destroyed, if not all of them, are not habitable anymore, of course. So I'm assuming this is, they also had the tsunami came ashore there in Suzu. And this is very rare, and we're 22 days in. And I mean, there's tens of thousands of people are still living on a glass of water and a slice of bread a day. What's going on? I don't understand it. I've never seen this kind of response, particularly from a country that is used to landslides, is used to earthquakes, is used to these events, is used to rescuing them, and actually have helicopters and refuse to use them, and refuse to let the Americans come in, refuse to let India come in with their search and rescue teams and dogs, refuse to let Chinese search and rescue teams with specialized dog come in and rescue people. Why would they do that? We've never seen them say no before. These are very rare pictures of Suzu, which shouldn't, and this was taken with a drone. And that's the first time we've seen the word drone in 22 days, isn't it? It hopes to help all those impacted rebuild their homes and get through tough times. Why would you rebuild your homes? Why would you rebuild your homes here? It's a 3,000 to 4,000 year old fault line just ruptured. There's zero possibility that's not going to rupture again soon. It's zero possibility. So why would you want to rebuild your home when the original rupture was very tiny? And they acknowledge that. We've covered that. More than 15,000 people still in shelters 3 weeks after Japan's earthquake. The government apparently has acquired 23,700 homes. 23,700 outside the prefecture, or at least outside the earthquake zones. and the majority of them outside the prefecture. 23,000 homes for families, 23,000 families. And there's word now it's around 35,000 homes are destroyed. I can't see that. Can you see that? And why are we recycling these pictures over and over for 22 days? How come we're not getting any new pictures from a prefecture where not everybody's still rescued, where many people are still abandoned, where many communities still haven't been reached? More than 49,000 homes also lack running water due to serious damage to the infrastructure. 3 weeks later, and they still haven't opened up the whole prefecture. So how bad was the earthquake? Or how bad was the radioactive fallout from the Shika nuclear fuel pool meltdown? More than 15,000 people, which is equal to 10 nuclear reactors melting down at one time. Each of them are bigger, 100 times bigger than Chernobyl. More than 15,000 people still in shelters 3 weeks after the Japanese earthquake. Well, the ones that were in the shelter, because you can't get no peace there, went back to their crumbled homes or sleeping in their cars and other things. And this is a step up where they actually got tents so you're not staring in each other's face all the time. But after 10 days, your body can barely handle that anymore. Many of the broken and blocked roads that left the region temporarily isolated remain in poor condition and are causing communication problems. So it's not temporarily isolated, they're still isolated. South Korea business lobby donated US $500,000. And remember, South Korea, Japan poisoned everybody there for the first 3 years. South Korea acknowledges because he shipped back how much? Over $6 million worth of seafood that was deadly radioactive. This is the Americans, their Black Hawk helicopter that Japan wouldn't let them use. Especially, it's really hard to comprehend how in the first 72 hours, the most critical time on the entire planet, when you have an emergency to rescue people, life and death on a whole scale, they refused to let the Americans, which were good to go. They had dogs and helicopters and military, and they were ready to go in and start rescuing people. China, India, many other countries, same thing. Japan wouldn't let them go in. How come? How evil. They should be charged with genocide and mass murder. 2 Black Hawk helicopters from U.S. Army Aviation Battalion, Japan, headquartered, blah, 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 in central Tokyo last week, which is simply not true. A few days back, yes, but not last week. The quake collapsed buildings, shredded highways, and we do mean shredded them, folks. And the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo announced a $100,000 aid package, which is embarrassing, isn't it? That day, that included essential resources like blankets, water, medical supplies, which is about 4 days ago. Now they're going to let pets at the Kanazawa earthquake shelter. And Kanazawa was way down there. It was way down here. So there's damage all the way down there. But Shika is up there across from Nanano. We know everything on that peninsula has been shaken to pieces. But why aren't we seeing footage of the community? Mobile laundry sent to quake-hit city to serve survivors. Well, they don't got no water. How are you going to do laundry if you got no water? Why not send them like a whole bunch of water tablets so they can sterilize some water and be able to drink more than a cup a day? A wide swath of the disaster zone in Nordic Peninsula remains without water. 22 days later, Yubu City asked a contracted trucking company to send its container, which is equipped with 9 washing machines for the quake survivors. No showers, can't do laundry for 22 days, abandoned by your own government. So the nuclear industry doesn't get a fat lip and a black eye. The need for washing is increasing in areas without water supply. How are you going to wash if you haven't got water? How does that work? Anybody want to tell me, explain to me how that friggin' works? And they're due to arrive in Suzu City on Tuesday, tomorrow, and the machines can be used for free if you can find any water. How are you going to get in there? How the hell are you going to get in there? And the whole peninsula got 1,400 landslides, and the highways are torn apart. And they could have fixed it all in the first 10 days. Right? The big military industrial engineering could have came in there with bulldozers and backhoes and excavators and everything, contraption you can imagine. They could have just gouged their way right. They could have built new roads through the forest to open up access. They've always done it before. Oh, hot chocolate. We're on a hot chocolate splurge this week. So 150,000 people live in a nuclear radioactive fallout zone. If you have an earthquake, how are you going to escape if you got a meltdown? Oh, that's right, you can't. Right? You can't escape, can you? And fallout is not just going to be in that area. That's where 150,000 people live in a 30-kilometer zone. And once the roads are blocked, you can't escape, and you're sucking up that radiation. You don't know it, you can't smell it, you can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't feel it, you can't pick it up, you can't throw rocks at it, you can't perceive it. But guess what? So you're going to evacuate, and you go down, the road's dropped and it's gone, and somebody drives off the cliff and falls 200 feet, smashes into the ground. Next car comes up and hits your bumper and drives you over it. Everybody's panicking to get out of there. And then everybody has to sit there and get contaminated, and then over the next couple of years get sick, liquidate your assets to get another couple of years for your loved ones. The nuclear industry hates your guts. There's very clear. It's very clear I shouldn't be allowed to own a camera. I should have checked those pictures. But anyway, the landslides are incredible, and my apologies. And I am serious about owning a camera. I got to be the worst person on the planet with a camera. Thank God cameras are almost foolproof. It's not idiot-proof, unfortunately for me, but it's foolproof for the average person. I really shouldn't be allowed to own a camera. I seem to be just nothing but... let's keep going. I've since beating myself up. Repairs may take more than 6 months at the Japanese nuclear power plant, the Shika nuclear power plant. The company says that the larger than expected tremor that hit the plant's foundation, never hit nothing else, just the reactor 1 foundation, Dana. And if you don't understand, I go back and watch the beginning of last night's video. But since the jolts lasted a relatively short cycle of 0.047 seconds, well, let's see what 0.47 seconds can do. Oh, it can do that, can it? Stuff like that. That's only 0.47 seconds. They're all the same earthquake. It's the same cycle. It does that in 0.47 seconds. It does that in 0.47 seconds. It didn't have a major impact on the key structures, like the containment vessels in the reactor buildings. Well, the containment vessels don't matter at Shika because the reactor's been closed down since 2011. There's nothing in the containment vessels. The fuel pools are at the top of the reactor buildings. And I can guarantee you that reactor 1 fuel pools have melted down, if not reactor 2 also. Which parts of the Ishikawa are okay to travel after Noto quake? Government shares a guideline map. Basically nothing. We're allowed to have the dogs in the shelters, which is separate shelters, by the way, for the dogs, is the green down there. The orange is destroyed, and the red is also destroyed. Shika, the community of Shika, was hit with a 7 on Japanese seismic intensity scale of 7. So it was hit with the largest earthquake that they can have. Is what they're telling you. The community. And you say in the basement it was equal to an upper 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. Please don't come to Noto yet, but please definitely come for sightseeing in Kanazawa and Kaga. The maps noted request. Vietnamese trainees told to undergo contraception to work in Japan. You got to take the pill if you're going to go to Japan and work there. What a bunch of pricks, eh? And they're bitching and whining and sniveling and crying about the low birth rate in Japan. And they want to sterilize you before you can come there and work for them scumbags in a nuclear wasteland. With the practice raising concern that such trainees' reproductive rights were not respected. Trainees instead of humans. See, because you're not human to them, right? In fact, the women in Japan are not human to the Japanese. Any idea how difficult it is for a Japanese victim to get a conviction against a male perpetrator in Japan? Japan was the only country that I know of that sold children's panties, used panties in vending machines. And there's some still going on in the back alleys today. They would give children, high school children, and 500 pairs of panties. They had to put them on and put them in a plastic bag and put the time and date on it. And they went directly into vending machines. What the hell are they doing with that many children's panties, I wonder? What kind of culture does that anyway? It's not really a culture. It's like it's a pretty sick culture, I can tell you that much. Now, I articulated this earlier. The supply risk fuels uranium flight to more than 16-year peak. But also I showed you that last year there was 2 reactors offline, right? So they went down 2 reactors. They're down to 413 worldwide now from 415. But there was almost twice as many gigawatts came online as the total of nuclear worldwide after 80 years. Well, like it's over 600 to none worth of renewables online compared to large reactors. So uranium is out there to rob, and they're doing really good. No one's paying attention to them. No one's able to hold them accountable. Uranium prices hit the highest in more than 16 years on a buying frenzy triggered after the world's largest miner of the nuclear fuel highlighted production's risk. And the price surge is likely to mean the restart of mothballed capacity. Is likely to mean the restart of the mothballed capacity, which is the Conference of Parties 28, United Nations, Constipated Party 28 last year, was pushing that narrative to restart reactors that were going to be decommissioned. And the reason they shut down the reactors is because the containment vessels are very high pressure, 1,000 to 2,000 psi. And they're very brittle after 40, 50 years of bombardments with neutron, beta rays, alpha rays, gamma shines, etc., etc. And this is a well-known phenomenon. In fact, original charters for nuclear reactors was 30 years because of that Pacific flaw, lethal flaw. Uranium oxide prices under pressure for years after the Fukushima accident in 2011 battered the demand, picked up momentum in 2021 because the Sprout Physical Uranium Trust and Yellowcake Corporation bought up the physical Yellowcake uranium, right? Which is from the mining company. And they have to go through ponds and ponds of chemicals to get that. And those ponds and ponds of chemicals are left to evaporate into the environment. It's despicable. The whole industry, every direction of the industry you look at is absolutely unmitigated scumbags. It's unbelievable. Like, they should all be arrested It's evil on a level that the average person can't possibly comprehend until they look way down the rabbit hole of this industry and come to the realization that they are a plague, they are a parasite upon humanity that will destroy humanity. They can't survive without consuming humanity and the 8 million species. Fijian youths condemned Japan's discharge of tritium because they don't seem to comprehend, and this is why they get the media attention. Surely that media knows who I am. They don't understand, those victims, those children don't understand the reactors are all gone after day 6 and that the plumes covered the entire planet. The tanks are empty. The tanks were built to manipulate humanity. And they've done that. They 100% succeeded, didn't they? Sending more than 23,000 tons of nuclear wastewater into the Pacific Ocean in less than 3 months. And so they're going by the narrative that since August the 24th, 2023, is the only releases. Nothing got released before that. That's the official version. But the reality of it is, it was all gone by day 6. By March the 17th, everything was released into the environment. And the industry in 2013, this is the official picture. Both of these are the official picture of Reactor 4 in 2013. One of them obviously can't be real. If you look at that in 2013, you're saying, well, the ocean's polluted permanently. The entire planet is. Because there was at least 10 reactor cores at the top of that despicable reactor that shouldn't have existed in a massive earthquake zone with 1,000 earthquakes a year and on a fault line on top of that with a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis. Why would you build a reactor there for when you know that eventually had to happen at some point? Well, the Japanese knew in World War II that the wind would bring balloons all the way across to North America. And so they sent over tens of thousands of balloons with bombs on them that they knew would end up in America and just randomly cause terror, right? And so they knew, building the reactors where they did, that if they had an accident, those plumes would go straight to North America. The discharge of nuclear contaminated water into the sea will pollute the Pacific Ocean and destroy the coral groups. And it will seriously affect the living resources of the islanders, endangering the health of the people on the island. And cause immeasurable damage to the ecosystem. Bear with me. And will cause immeasurable damage to the ecosystem. So what they're refusing to tell them is that the ocean is destroyed. We've done the research expeditions for 6 years, under siege the entire time. And so we've done all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia, the Pacific Ocean, all the way to Alaska, year after year. We went out there on the big sea, year after year, got the daylights kicked out of myself year after year. And now the plume covered the entire planet, so we launched research expeditions. And here's what we found. We found that the species to your left, there's around 7,500 highly visible species. I can list them off to you too, by the way, off the top of my head. Are missing. And these are before and after pictures of the entire coastline. Was like that. It's 27,000 islands. It was a tropical rainforest with a 19-foot tide exchange every day. The species to your left are exterminated. So normally I can never come ashore in my Zodiac because you would punch a whole bunch of holes into it no matter where you went. And I used to pick 20,000 of them a day for a living as a commercial diver. I've done many other industries as a commercial diver, but that was my favorite. Because you had this incredible diversity of life. And every day was magic. Every day you went down there, and it was incredible. And every time you touched the ocean floor, you felt guilty because you couldn't help but damage some of the species. it was completely saturated with life. Now it's equal to landing on the moon. There's nothing there. And not only that, there's no birds in the forest. There's no insects in the forest. And at the high tide line, there's around 30,000 well-known insects. And so when the tide went out, these insects would inundate the tidal zones and do their thing, right? In the algae, in the kelps, there was around 5,500 well-known invertebrates without the backbones. These are like little shrimps. That's 5,500 species would live in the 700 algae. They're also permanently gone. And so the migratory birds would come in here and they would get whatever they want to eat. They had hours and hours, and they would just hang out for the next low tide and stuff themselves. And if they were divers, they can dive. And instead what we see is mass die-offs in the millions along the coastline when we were doing the research expeditions. Because now there's nothing for them to feed on anymore. It's stunning when you see this here, but this is what it would look like pre-Fukushima. In 2011, it looked like that. Within a year, it looked like, well, it didn't look like that. Within a year, it was exterminated. So what we done was we launched research expeditions. Again, this is a Neptunium-239 dispersal based on 20 days. And so what we done was launch research expeditions, emergency research expeditions. And I'm still doing research with that same boat, by the way. And now we see an extinction event here in the Atlantic Ocean. This is an extinction event. Make no mistakes about what I'm telling you. This is an extinction event. They also faked being in reactor 3. And so in the tidal zone, it was this absurd diversity. It was magic. That was magic. The whole coastline was like that. And now it's an extinction event. Destroyed by the nuclear industry and covered up by the medias and the nuclear industry. You know, why would the world media pretend they're in a building that don't exist? Why take that chance? Why was that so important to pretend that reactor 4, for instance, didn't melt down? Why was that so important? Well, the research expedition shows you, don't they? Because it's an extinction event. What else can compel all these medias to go through that kind of trouble? I mean, the radioactive models are backed up by actual academic studies of fallout. Okay, let's come back. Come back and back and back. So when the Fijian youth condemned the discharge of radioactive water, they're talking about tritium. They're not talking about the actual perpetual releases that have been going on for 13 years. They're not aware that these cover stories exist. The protesters should have these two pictures and says they're faking it, folks. Let's get them right now. Let's end this disease factory once and for all worldwide. And who do you think is scuttling the renewable renaissance worldwide? It's the nuclear industry, right? Drone footage reveals devastation of the Wajima market. Footage captured by a drone shows the charred remains of the Asiate Street Market area, which is over 1,000 years old, in Ishikawa Prefecture, Wajima City, which was ravaged. Why are we still seeing those footage? So the only new footage come out is the exact same footage we've been looking at for 22 days. So now they flew a drone over it. But why didn't they fly a drone over the rest? Why over the burnt out place instead of the 5,000 homes that they refused after 2 days to acknowledge were destroyed? What the hell is going on? What are they covering up again? Why are they pretending again? Why are we seeing these same pictures over and over again? So the first drones to fly are back in the area that everybody's already seen relentlessly for the last 22 days. Ontario is about to decide whether to overhaul Canada's oldest nuclear power plant. Canada's oldest. These are not words you want to hear, by the way. Health system urged to brace for a major shift in dementia in Canada, because the radioactive fallout in Canada It causes not only heart problems and liver problems and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline, it causes Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and Down syndrome and diabetes and schizophrenia. Radioactive fallout is literally the textbook, the medical textbook of illnesses. Your immune system is compromised. On top of that, and you become more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. Estonia plans a small nuclear reactor to quit the oil shale by 2030. So how are you going to build something by 2030 when you don't even have an application into the regulatory agency? You have to build an experimental one to find out if it's dangerous, to figure out what needs to be fixed and upgraded and re-engineered. Then you have to build another one to quantify those assertions. It'll take you 30 years just before you actually get permission to mass produce these types of things. You can't just write it down on a piece of paper and let's get it on. Again, why isn't Estonia looking at geothermal? Why are they looking at this disgusting... And this is the new scale, which just robbed investors of $5 billion US. And laid off over 100 employees, because that's where all the money goes, to administration, not to physical. Estonia plans to build a small modular reactor to wean itself off the addiction to polluting oil shale and meet its target of producing 100% decarbonized electricity by 2030. Like, nuclear is not decarbonizing. And decarbonizing basically is another scam. You're talking about, like, the carbon emissions from gas, oil, and coal. They don't make plumes that covers the planet. You'll never see a plume from a plant of gas, oil, and coal. Right? If they break down, they're not going to show you a plume. And this plume here is the American NOAA. I'm going to flash forward it. This model is based on 40 days from a plume of emissions from Fukushima. But the gas, oil, and coal emissions don't create plumes like this. Carbon only travels at best in heavy winds, maybe 50 miles. And then that helps create other plants and insects and birds and trees and bushes. If you don't have carbon, we look like the moon. You look exactly like the moon. You can't have anything on the planet without carbon. Carbon is not going to heat up a planet. It doesn't have those attributes. Nuclear does, though. And after 2.5 years, the Nuclear Energy Working Group set up by the Estonian Environmental Ministry in 2021 published its report on the potential use of nuclear energy in the country, and that the main conclusion of the report published in December is that it's possible to build small modular reactors. How can you build something when you don't even have an application into the regulatory agency? How can you build something and quantify using it when it has to go through incredible processes? So you put the application into the regulatory agency, 1 million pieces of paper. It takes them 3 or 4 years to process that. Then they give it back to you and say, well, you got to correct this, that, those, them, these, everything else. So now you have to re-engineer it all. You have to submit it to the regulatory agency, and it's still going to take a couple of years to go through all of that. So then, once you got that, now you can find funding. That could take 5-10 years. But you're going to have to build it. You can't build an actual reactor for purpose. It has to be an experimental to find out if it will actually work. You're looking at 30 years before you bring it to fruition, if everything goes perfect. So why are they talking about small modular reactors? Because that's the best way to steal money from unsuspecting investors. Nuclear Energy Group, and we know that because we've been covering it heavily for many years now. Nuclear Energy Group recommends building nuclear power plants in Estonia. Yeah, but the Nuclear Energy Group, of course that's what they're going to recommend. The gases companies, energy groups will recommend building gas. The oil companies will recommend building oil. The solar will recommend building solar. Final report found that the nuclear energy will boost Estonia's renewable energy, but nuclear is not renewable energy. It's got nothing whatsoever to do. All nuclear power plants needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to it for its entire life. So there's no small modular reactors anywhere on the entire planet. So why are you going to tie up your resources and memorandums of understandings and everything else based on a complete fiction? And follow the International Atomic Energy Agency's roadmap. And the International Atomic Energy Agency is the ones that cooked up the story that these lost nothing and it was equal to 3 grams of sugar. That's the International Atomic Energy Agency that says that. Because if they were actual real checks and balances, which they're not, they don't have any authority. They're not a regulatory agency. They can't compel the country to do anything. They're a corporation like McDonald's and Walmart that happens to have 195 militaries. Antti Toomey, nice name, Deputy Secretary of the Ministry of Climate and Health and Working Group, said nuclear energy has proven its worth. It doesn't, but the small modular reactors don't exist. And there is no worth. Every country that got it is suffering from heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, endless issues. Without prior experience, introducing nuclear power to a country takes years of preparation and 9 to 11 years before to supply electricity. It helps us to achieve electricity security in Estonia. We hear this a lot, right? Oh, it'll give us a lot. But no matter which energy you use, it's going to give you energy security. It doesn't matter which one you use. And why won't you even consider geothermal? How can you not conceive that? How come that's never in the equation? They'll talk, we would like to use wind and solar, but there's no way to store the energy, so we can't use that, so we need nuclear. Nothing else is allowed into the conversation. So they really are a plague. They really are a burden on the 8 million species and the future of humanity. They basically condemned us now. Fortum, which is French, considers Nordic sites for new nuclear power. For a cleaner world. Is ludicrous as suggested. A Finnish utility, Fortum, is looking at several potential sites in Finland and Sweden, which is anti-nuclear, by the way, and getting rid of their reactors, to build nuclear power plants with smaller, large-scale reactors. There is no small scale. You don't have the manpower. You don't even have the legacy to build any. It's just a money grab, and you displace all the other solutions that are available. And I got some of them coming up, by the way. A major advantage to nuclear power would be that it can provide a base load that stabilizes the grid and power prices. Pointing out that wind and solar power varies with daylight and weather conditions. Well, first off, that's not true. The world's largest compressed air grid batteries, which is just compressed air, will store 10 gigawatt hours. That's an unbelievable amount. That's enough to power 1 million homes for 10 hours. So if you've got a city of 250,000 people, that's enough to power it for a day and a half. So if you build a bunch of them, it's just compressed air storage. You're compressing air either in the mine shafts, tunnels, or big containment underground. But I mean, batteries can't compete with something like this. Another technology that's been in use for decades is compressed air energy storage. But yet, and it's got a little tiny footprint. But yet these scumbags are claiming that there is no energy solutions for storage. So therefore nuclear is the only solution. EU Parliament calls for European strategy on geothermal energy. And there's new technology hitting the market this year for drilling deep and drilling quick. And one of them is where you're going to use pneumatic hammers, but first you're going to use pneumatic high-pressure water at 25,000 pounds per square inch to slice up the rocks as you're drilling down, and then a pneumatic hammer at many thousands of pounds to bust the rocks, and then the drill comes in behind it. So you can drill 7, 8, 9, 10 times quicker than conventional oil wells can drill. And there's no limit to your depth in many ways. So you can get down to 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, which surpasses gas, oil, and coal temperatures. So you can build these at gas, oil, and coal plants, nuclear plants, and then after 12 months when they're finished, you can turn off the gas, oil, and coal and nuclear and then just plug them into the same grid. Keep everything else in place. Geothermal. And you can do it in small communities. It's simple to do in small communities. You, like a community of 1,000 people, you can drill all the holes in a place the size of someone's back garden and extract the power of 1,000 homes in that community permanently. And 25 or 30 years down the road, you made a huge amount of profits. People paid very little every month for endless electricity. And now you got money sitting around to build another geothermal plant. Take your time and build it. And when your other one finally, you want to stop it, you just switch on your new one. And you can do this over and over and over for the next 1,000 years. Like we don't have enough farmlands to build any more nuclear power plants. Because that's where they build them. They build them all in farmlands because they're all hemorrhaging radiation. And that's how they poison you in your supermarkets. And if you think I'm wrong, you're very mistaken. Go back and scan my video. Actually, last night I covered that a lot. Geothermal energy is a reliable energy source that operates continuously with fixed costs. And how often do we hear solar and wind, but we don't hear geothermal? I dig it up so I can tell the story. And that's this week's headlines. All of this stuff is always going to be this week's headlines. Unlike other renewable energy technologies, geothermal installations do not require critical raw material like raw earth material. And geothermal energy is also listed among the strategic clean technologies under the net zero industry. Net zero was Miles Allen's a paper that he wrote, got him a cushy job at Cambridge or Oxford. I can't remember. Hang on. Let me show you how this whole friggin' scam actually works. Because it's quite fascinating, really, and I don't bring it up enough. I got it there. I'll find it. Here we go. What's the odds? Lordy, I found it. I found it. So there's 4 papers that showed up, and that has ruined everybody's life in the 8 million species. The first one was Brock Wallace, or Wallace Brock. Yeah, Wallace Brocker. He's the father of global warming. He wrote a paper like the hockey stick of global warming. There's Miles Allen, who's the physicist behind net zero. He wrote a paper. And so Brock Wallace's paper got picked up by United Nations, weaponized against you. Miles Allen, a single person, wrote a paper. It got picked up by United Nations, was weaponized against you. Then the carbon footprint. How can we bring the carbon footprint down? Well, it was you. The brief and frustrating history of carbon footprint. The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertisement campaign of the fossil fuel company BP in 2005 after a massive accident. They wanted to blame you for wanting the oil for their accident. And so they cooked up this public relation mass advertisement campaign that was then picked up by United Nations and weaponized against you. And then the final knife in everybody's back was this disgusting parasite, despicable monster, James Hansen, a revolting, hideous parasite. Bear with me here. Yeah, here we go. James Hansen wasn't even a real professor, and the climate scientists, their solution for everything is more nuclear. He'd done a 15-minute congressional speech that was picked up by United Nations. And it was an important turning point in the history of the global climate change. And his testimony was pivotal, and marked the official beginning of the global warming policy debate. So you had a proven scumbag, James Hansen. You had a despicable scumbag, BP Oil, for the carbon footprint. You had Miles Allen for net zero, and Brock Wallace, or Wallace Brocker, with the father of global warming. The father of global warming, the father of climate change, BP Oil, the father of carbon, and Miles Allen, the father of net zero. Those four people and their four papers, backed up by not only their word, has been weaponized against humanity now for many, many years by a powerful military-industrial complex known as United Nations, and should be known as the enemy of humanity, because that's who they are, right? Nuclear waste safety top of mind for politicians after Ontario disposal site approval, which we knew this was going to happen. We've been covering this for the last few weeks in particular, and for the last number of years, the last 5 or 6, 7 years or whatever. So Chalk River National Laboratory, which is a private consortium, and the two companies that now own it are notorious scum. Approval of a contentious radioactive waste facility, Deep River, Ontario, aka Chalk River National Laboratories, is bringing flaws in Canada's nuclear waste management to the fore, says area politicians. The waste facility at Chalk River Laboratory, 190 kilometers northwest of Ottawa. It's right on that river and it runs straight past Ottawa, and also millions of people use it for drinking water. And put 1 million cubic meters of low-level radioactive waste. Now, what we know about this industry after all these years is one thing that is very, very clear, is they'll have a low-level waste facility, they'll get the permits, and then they'll just bring in whatever they want. And if they want to get rid of plutonium, they'll just mix it with gravel until it meets some bizarre standard they cooked up, and then they'll put that there too. And that, why would you put it on a hill that grades straight down into a drinking water supply that goes for right down into the ocean eventually? Located about 1 kilometer from the Ottawa River. It's not 1 kilometer. We got pictures of it. I haven't got it there tonight. It's probably about 1,000 feet or something from the river, and it's all downhill. And they had 2 meltdowns there, and what they done was they just put grout in it and left it there, so every time it rains, it washes that into the river too. Who knows how many other accidents they have that they didn't declare or we didn't find out about. And you can be sure, unequivocally, that there was absurd amount. The project was met with opposition every step of the regulatory process. Yeah, and a lot of them were the control opposition, by the way. In the days after the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission greenlit the project, that there is no Nuclear Safety Commission in Canada. These are the industry's players, for goodness sakes. Again, what you call control opposition. It's a false flag. Some municipal federal politicians highlighted issues with this institution to deal with the Canadian nuclear waste after everything is finally passed. The Chalk River Waste Facility was opposed by a majority of Algonquins nations, which is the natives, and the Assembly of the First Nations, and more than 140 municipalities, environmental organizations, concerned citizens, largely because of its position near the Ottawa River, which supplies drinking water to millions of people downstream. And the biggest frustration through all of that is not having the ability to debate alternatives. Perhaps there's better alternatives, perhaps not, but we would never know because the consultation was on a single project. And Chalk River Laboratories, which is a big disease factory, was once run by the Crown Corporation Atomic Energy of Canada Limit, a despicable bunch of scum from the industry. And remarkably, in 2015, Stephen Harper's which was the prime minister, the degenerate prime minister at the time, conservative government who hit Fukushima, that's why I said those connotations. Stephen Harper's conservative government turned it into a government-owned, contract-operated model. Harper also sold the Atomic Energy Commission, Crown Corporation Limited, can-do reactor business to a division of Quebec for $15 million. $15 million. He gave it away for $15 million. It's unbelievable. There's the Ottawa River. There's some of the mountains they already got on site, look. So you can put all the cover on you want it, but when it rains, that permeates down to the ground and washes out into the Columbian River, or the Ottawa River. Today, day-to-day operation of Chalk River Laboratories and Atomic Energy Commission Limited owned sites are contracted out to Canadian nuclear laboratories, and the Canadian nuclear laboratories are not even Canadian. They're owned by a private consortium comprised of Atkins Realists, a former SNC Laval, which is Quebec, and two Texas-based multinational, Fluor and Jacobs, whose legacy is genocide and omnicide. It's unbelievable. That is unbelievable. They call it the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories because it leads you into complacency. Glunk, 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 glunk. Bound to get thirsty at some point. Keep her going. Never ends around here, unfortunately. It's the same company that can't run a railway in Ottawa, said May. So the question is, what could go wrong besides everything? The Crown Corporation website said the government-owned, contract-operated. Just because the government owned it, then Jacob and Fluor, which their legacy goes right back to the infancy of the nuclear industry. And their legacy at Hanford should mean you would never give them any footprint in your country. For waste management, Chalk River National Laboratories operations, all while reducing cost, which is the last thing you want to take a chance on, and risk to the people of Canada. You're going to put the Canadian freshwater supply in the hands of two corporations with one of the evilest, really, the most evil legacy you can imagine. And some politicians believe the private sector shouldn't be in charge of safely managing Canadian radioactive waste. There's an understatement that nobody in their right mind would let those two particular corporations do what they're doing right now. There's going to be 1 million cubic meters of radioactive waste we're going to be taking for around 500 years next to the water source for millions of people. And there's nothing you can do about it. Nuclear industry knows how to cover all their bases. They control your medias, they control your universities, and they control the key positions in your government. Unless you're willing to bear arms and go wipe them out, you don't have a chance of stopping them. We have to have some kind of surveillance over this. We can't leave it to the private enterprise. Like, the private enterprise is there to make a profit. They're not there for moral high ground. And the only way you can make a profit is if you poison everything and everybody. And if you're in the nuclear industry, that's what you do for a living. So it's rubber stamp for everything. Because nuclear waste management is a question of safety as well as a moral and ethical issue, the government, not the private sector, should lead decisions. The government has no moral compass whatsoever, by the way. Should lead decisions on where waste storage facilities are built. Why would you build it? Why not build it somewhere? Like, that whole area is one big watershed for 1,000 square miles. It's just thousands and thousands of ponds on top of that. Why not take it up into the Shield, where there's no water, where there's 5 miles of rock in any direction you dig? If that's so be it, where you're going to put it is underground. But to put it where they're putting it, where they're just putting a cover on it, is ridiculous. It's absurd. It's absurd. it ultimately is going to lead to the destruction of every future generation. According to the Canadian nuclear laboratories, who can only make a profit by dumping it, the majority of the low-level radioactive waste is soil and debris from decommissioning buildings. You know, like the 2 melter reactors they had there. Along with some contaminated equipment, you know, like the 2 nuclear meltdowns they had. Like shoe covers. Like every time you hear these connotations of shoe covers and clothing and rags and equipment, you know you're being set up. You know their evil is amongst you. Some industry experts, environmental groups, and citizens warn that intermediate level waste will likely end up in the mound. Intermediate is very lethal, by the way. And the current structure naturally induces suspicion, wrote M.V. Ramana, a professor of nuclear disarmament at the University of British Columbia, who we've covered quite a bit. And I generally don't agree with very much that person has to say. In a submission to the committee, he pointed to the International Convention on Nuclear Safety, which called on signatories, including Canada, to ensure there's an effective separation between the regulatory bodies and any organization concerned with promoting nuclear energy. And I do not think the current reporting structure constitutes an effective separation. I agree with that. Thank you very much. Many witnesses raised concerns about the Chalk River near surface disposal facilities. And of course, like, if he wants to make a point, if he wants to bring a point home, there's only one way that you can bring that point home. And we don't see anybody on the planet do it. I don't understand it. You can beat the shit out of any nuclear apologist on the planet. And I'll show it to you in a moment, maybe. There's endless piles of documentation that I got, if I can find it. But there's a few that I put together that tells it like no other. Here you go. All you got to do is bring in this clip. I played it earlier in the show for everybody. All you do is screen capture it, record the 40-second video, and play it at the meeting and saying, look, the industry faked, the media faked being in that reactor building. That professor, all he had to do was bring in a picture and say, look, they already faked it once. Why should we ever trust him again? How can we ever look them in the eye without calling them scum again? Because why don't we see anybody on the planet do that? Not a single person on the planet doing that. How is this even possible? How can our voices be the lone voice on the planet that is honest? How is that even possible? How come the big shots beyond nuclear is not out there screaming this loud front and center? In fact, beyond nuclear, Kevin Camp and a number of other ones there have denied the building is destroyed, have denied that the fuel pool's melted down. Denied it. Not just once, but relentless amount of times. Ernie Gunnarson, who made the assemblies, the racks for the fuel assemblies for the fuel pools for 70 similar reactors in the United States, has refused to acknowledge that they're lying, refused to acknowledge that they're not in the building, refused to acknowledge that the fuel pool is gone. And the list is so long, and we've covered it for so many years. At what point, because at some point we're going to have to admit the truth. At some point in the future, we're going to have to say, oh, by the way, they faked the reactor. At some point, that's coming out. Why did Greenpeace block me on every one of their sites when I tweeted them videos and pictures? Why did Greenpeace take down these videos and pictures? And when I tweeted it to them on Greenpeace Canada, Greenpeace United Kingdom, Greenpeace Australia, Greenpeace New Zealand, Greenpeace American, Greenpeace National, Greenpeace Japan. Why did they all block me on Twitter? All the big shakers and movers in the the environmental movement blocked me because they're controlled opposition. Many witnesses raised concerns about the Chalk River near surface disposal facilities as well as other waste management plans for high-level nuclear waste. Chalk River shouldn't exist. After 1955 nuclear meltdown, that should have been the end of Chalk River. The Bloc Québécois is extremely concerned about the hazards of Chalk River disposal facility, particularly the risk to the drinking water. See, all of these got a part to play in order to convince the public that we done our best, but the scum won out, right? That's all you're seeing. It's all posturing. EDF takes 3 UK nuclear units offline to inspect the steam valves. EDF, which is the French government, who owns basically the reactors in the United Kingdom, because the great United Kingdom can't even build their own reactors. And the nuclear decommission authorities in the United Kingdom, they're the definition of scum, aren't they? They really are, though. Here we go again. Another 2.4 gigawatts coming offline. Large chunk of the capacity is offline at a time when the grid is dealing with cold weather, followed by high winds. Nuclear can provide a low-carbon source of backup power to intermittent sources of renewable energy. It's intermittent because you refuse to use solutions that exist. So you can demonize it. Despite all the demonization, in 2023 there was 570 gigawatts, 507 gigawatts of renewables came online in 12 months. And nuclear industry lost 2 reactors. They didn't gain a single reactor. Pumped hydro can deliver 100% renewable electricity. And all you got to do, like if you build 2 reservoirs instead of using the sea, if you build 2 reservoirs and excess energy gets pumped up to the top pond. You can do it anywhere. You don't need to be near a river, don't need to be near an ocean per se. You can do it anywhere. That's an incredible amount of resources. But you can do the same thing with compressed air storage. Let me show you that model. If I'm lucky enough to find it tonight. Bear with me. Always takes a moment. I'm pretty quick usually. But it doesn't always work out the way I want it, does it? Oh, that's looking familiar now. Boy, goodness, I think we got it. This technology is pretty old on top of that. So you're going to do, this company got $54 million. And all they're going to do is compress air down in 2 tunnels. Pretty small footprint, isn't it? So you dig a tunnel there, tunnel. You can dig 100 tunnels in that circle. That's enough to power New York City many times over for a couple of days in compressed air storage. You get it? And these mine shafts are easy to do. You don't need tanks, and it's just low pressure. And that the energy used to compress the air, the heat, you can store that too, and use that to unpack the compressed air later. Welcome to a new kind of energy company. We store, secure, and share the world's limitless energy. But why wouldn't you use geothermal? Yeah, this is great. But what about geothermal? Now, Dominica to construct a 10 megawatt geothermal plant. The headline actually said 10 kilowatts. I changed it to what it should say, 10 megawatt. But I wonder who made that mistake, and how could you make that mistake? Because a kilowatt, 10 kilowatts is not enough to run your house. That's 10 megawatts. That's enough to run around 8,000 homes. And look at the footprint. POISAC, shit, response to Ken Dante's opinion piece about nuclear power and Plebo. I'm probably butchering it, my apologies. In an opinion piece in last week's Chieftain, Mr. Dante, it is not clear if he is speaking on his own behalf, on behalf of the City of Plebo Energy Advisory Commission or the Mayor, accused the Plebo Innovative Energy Special Advisory Committee, of being delusional because we recommended that Xcel Energy and the community consider the construction of a small modular reactor to replace Comanche 3. Well, you can't You can't build a reactor that doesn't exist, moron. Bill Gates, TerraPower, General Electric, Westinghouse, and 30 other companies are not delusional because they support advanced nuclear power. Yes, they are delusional. There is no small modular reactors. Not a single one of them has an application into the regulatory agency. And many of them have been in business for over a decade. Not one of them are trying to build a reactor, not even an experimental one. So they are delusional. These are a few of the companies that are investing hundreds of millions and billions of investors' money, not their money. They're not using their money. They're investor monies that were gullible enough, manipulated by people like you, sir. Or scumbag, I should say. Microsoft recently announced that it was hiring a program manager to develop small nuclear reactors to provide safe, reliable, emission-free power for their data centers. Yeah, Google just done it with geothermal. Why wouldn't you do the same? Why would you use nuclear? With mixed oxide fuel, no less, is the only way you can pull the trick off. But it turns out you can't even pull that pony off. Can you? Just because these companies exist, like NewScale, who just stole $5 billion from the taxpayers and who knows how much from the investors, which, by the way, are suing them. I think the people should sue this person here. The United States Department of Energy recently stated power system decarbonization modeling, regardless of levels of renewable deployment, suggests that the U.S. will need 550 to 770 gigawatts of additional clean, firm capacity to reach net zero. Well, last year there was 507 gigawatts of renewables came online. There was no nuclear worldwide came online last year at all. That didn't replace something they took offline. There's no new gain. In fact, they're currently down to 513 reactors. Nuclear power is one of the few proven options to deliver this at scale while creating high-paying jobs. This is really interesting, folks, because you don't really hear them say this too often. We do. A scattered time when I hear it. This is one of those rare times. While creating high-paying jobs with concentrated economic benefits for the communities most impacted by the energy transition. Our recommendations are based on facts. You can't base it on facts. Small modular reactors don't exist. What are you doing memorandums of understandings and putting eggs in baskets that are full of holes? Why would you do that? So that other solutions don't show up, right? Based on facts. You can't be on facts. There is no small modular reactors applications, let alone reactors. You can't have a reactor without submitting the applications like a million pieces of papers to the regulatory agencies where 300, 400, 500 people will pour over that for about 3 years, find all the flaws they can find the first round, send it back to the engineers who will redesign it for a couple of years, send it back to the regulatory agency, which takes another couple of years to process that million papers, and that goes on for a decade or more. Then they got to finally get the money at this stage now to clear land if they're approved. That takes another 4 or 5 years and $500 million. They don't have the supply network. Not only that, renewables are accelerating. So why wouldn't you go that route? Because this is not only obsolete, it's lethal on every step of the way. Small modular reactor providing 500 megawatts of power. These are not small. These are large reactors. And it's half the size of the largest ones. Small modular reactors are supposed to be even less than 300 megawatts, which are still large reactors. So to conflate the word small modular reactors with 500 megawatts, which are massive, would take up less than 35 acres. And we hear this dirty, despicable routine every time, don't we? And provide 200 to 300 jobs paying 60 to 200,000 a year. And taxes $95 million a year. And then, as soon as you put fuel in the pool, what happens? You poison everybody, and they have to spend all their savings and income on healthcare because you poison them for all these decades. Mr. Danny wants the community to dismiss this opportunity with no study, no analyst, and without presenting an alternative. Well, he did present an alternative. And rather than dealing with personal damage to families in the Pluto community who will lose their high-paying jobs or be forced to move out of the community, Mr. Dante pushed the tired, false slogan of no nuclear and more solar. The tired, false solution, really. False solution, really. Why wouldn't you look at geothermal? He states that the community needs to support additional solar and wind and batteries instead of geothermal, by the way, or compressed air storage, or water batteries. In his opinion, this is best for the community, even though the 500 megawatts of solar will provide only 5 to 10 jobs, which is awesome, isn't it? And paying 40 to 80,000 a year and only 1.69 million a year in taxes. So what's wrong with that? So if you're not going to flood the community with radioactive fallout, then you're wrong. As one of our members stated, this is personal to me, it's not hypothetical. Well, it is hypothetical. Small modular reactors don't exist. Why not deal with reality and come up with geothermal and compressed air storage for wind and solar, which solves everybody's problem immediately? In fact, Canada, last year when Rob Ford was elected in Ottawa, the first thing he done, because that's pro-nuclear territory, right? 18 reactors. The first thing they done was cancel 750 wind and solar farms. And cancel them. And not only that, 750 wind and solar farms, these are huge facilities, incredible amount of energy. The problem was they were competing with nuclear. There was also $4.5 billion set aside for the renewable industry to create storage. They took that money and gave it to Bruce Nuclear Power. And what's Bruce Nuclear Power going to do with that kind of money? They're going to make storage at a nuclear power plant that doesn't need storage. And they were laughing about it. They were laughing and having a lot of fun and destroying central Ontario, Canada. Mr. Dante, however, dismisses the jobs and the taxes and states that solar and wind backed by storage should be built and that there's plenty of land to build solar and wind. And he's wrong on both accounts. He anticipated these tired old false arguments and refuted them on page 16 of the report. And he's either not read the report or has no intention of letting facts get in the way of his opinion. Like yourself, right? You have no intention of letting the facts get in the way of your opinion. And everything you're saying is based on something that might happen 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And the author of this is a despicable scumbag. I completely disrespect him for what he's doing. And his dishonesty is just blatant. Wind values is measured by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, established that it is not cost effective to build wind farms there. And that is why we do not see wind farms there. Well, because the nuclear industry got to them? Why wouldn't you use wind farms? Why wouldn't you use wind anyway with compressed air storage? Because you can do it in 1 year instead of 9 to 12, 14, 15, 16 years. It would take almost 13 solar farms of 500 megawatts to replace $21 million in tax payments. So his whole argument is predicated upon jobs and tax benefits, so-called tax benefits to the community. And then when the plant finally expires, all that money gets pulled out and the community falls apart. But you put wind and solar with storage there and geothermal. So geothermal comes first, and then wind and solar and storage to back up the geothermal for peak power. I see so many of these people so many times, and I can't contain my contempt for them. I really can't. And I shouldn't. Why should I? These are scum of the earth. Mr. Dante also believes wind and solar plus battery storage can provide the power to replace the Comanche 3, and current storage is short-term. However, wind and solar with long-duration storage are not yet cost competitive. Well, actually they are. There's many solutions that are cheaper than stupid, idiotic batteries. 4 compressed air energy storage startups. You should look at that. Pumped hydro, where you build 2 artificial ponds and you just pump water to the top one. These are unbelievable simple. World's largest compressed air grid batteries will store up to 10 gigawatt hours. So the technology, and look at the footprint. The solutions are everywhere. There are abundant other solutions. There's a ridiculous amount of solutions out there. Just bear with me. Hydro store plant, 400 megawatts, 3,200 megawatt hour compressed air storage in the United States. And that's the site. And they're going to do it underwater, which is quite a neat trick, actually. A 50-year system lifespan, no toxic material, emission-free, can provide rotational inertia and supported grid stability. So 400 megawatts, enough for 400,000 homes for 8 hours each day. So that's peak power. Each day is covered. And here's the footprint. Right, that's the footprint. And by the way, if you're not talking about carbon, or not carbon, but pollution, the world's 15 biggest ships create more pollution than all the cars in the world. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Because they use that as justification many times about pollution. But yet, no one's even picking on these guys. And so there's 90,000 of these ships on the ocean at any given time. 90,000. 90,000. So let's bring up the calculator for 1 second. So you can see with your own two eyes what that translation actually is. Anything ready, Dana? So, which is equal to 760,000 cars. So there's 90,000 ships, 90,000. And divide that by 15 ships equals 6,000. Multiply that by 760 million cars, because that's the number. That's 4,560,000 cars. And so if you go backwards, it works out to over 4 trillion people worth of automobiles, the animosity equivalent, right? So just back that up for 1 second. So now you take 6,000 and multiply it by 8 billion people. Equals 48. I got that wrong, did I? Oh, I didn't do it all. Hang on, I'll do it one more time. So 6,000 times 8 billion, Dana, by 8 billion equals 48 trillion people a day. So the ships on the ocean, pollution is equal to having 48 trillion people on the planet. With Japan and the evil UN, International Atomic Energy Agency, hide a nuclear fuel pool meltdown again. Why wish they would, Dana. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, after the video, unless I can find it right now, what I mean by again, oh yeah, I'm on the wrong page here. Hang on, I can probably find it. Hey, luck would have it. So this is 2013, where the world's media is pretending they're at the fuel pool at Fukushima that doesn't exist. So if you think for a second that they wouldn't fake the Shika nuclear meltdown fuel pools, you're actually wrong, because we have an absurd amount of documentation showing that they've already done that. World's largest nuclear reactor aims to power the Earth with unlimited energy, arguably the most complex machine ever designed. And there's zero possibility that's going to come to fruition in the next 50 to 100 years. It's actually zero possibility. It's zilch. It's zero. There's nothing. It's a nada. Experts at Inter claim the way here to Earth is headed to an unimaginable goal, everlasting energy. They got tens of thousands assigned, the best scientists, all the best metals man can produce, thrown into something that's never going to work. And look, they're lying. Fission is used to power 436 nuclear reactors around the world. There's actually only 413, scumbag. It requires slamming neutrons into larger atoms to create energy. And when you take the fuel out of the reactor and put it in the pool, it still does that. And there's no containment, and that's released perpetually into the environment. The process does not contribute significant greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Really? That's an interesting statement. So you're saying that's not significant. This is a model from Fukushima, the Xenon 133. And this is April the 5th. So that's April the 5th. And this is 19.5 days later. See, gas, oil, and coal emissions don't make plumes like that. You don't see any plumes modeled for gas, oil, and plume. And gas, oil, and coal. Because they don't do that. Anything does that is nuclear. And that's enough fallout right there to contaminate every species and every human on the entire planet many times over. It never goes away, and all of it's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. Well, you know, after 80 years, we call it climate change. It does but it does produce radioactive waste. Again, when you hear they don't tell you what radioactive waste is, do they? Radioactive waste is material that is splitting atoms and releasing it into the environment. And that stuff never goes away. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light. Every nuclear power plant is hemorrhaging it from their fuel pools at a rate would terrify you. It's absurd how much we're talking about. And you can trace the decline of all the species and to cancer epidemics, diabetes epidemics, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, Down syndrome. You can trace that all the way back to the inception of nuclear industry. You know, the cancer epidemics was in the 70s after a couple of decades of heavy nuclear wars. You call it nuclear testing. They're nuclear wars. It's the same weapons, the same radioactive fallout, and last the same amount of time and contaminate the same small piece of Earth that we have to live on. And the only spot in the solar system that we have access to, and we are destroying that for this bizarre chicken. These are cowards. This industry is not cowards. It's an industry of incredible cowards. And fusion, by the way, only works in the sun because the sun can spit out the excess fusion for 1 million miles. That's the only reason fusion works. You can't do it on Earth, so it can't work. It can't work. Microsoft hires Archie Manoharan as the Director of Nuclear Technologies and joins from the micro-modular reactor firm, which doesn't have any micro-modular reactors. So somebody that's already failed in many different corporations is now at Microsoft. Don't you love these pretty pictures? It's all there, the pictures. They're not even pictures, they're depictions of something that will never be. And look at this. She previously worked at Ultrasafe Nuclear. That's not much street creds. That just means you really actually are another scumbag. You really truly are. But she's so much more than that. She was the Director of Nuclear Strategies and Programs at Ultrasafe Nuclear scumbags. I've had a lot of interaction with them over the years. They're real life scumbags, eh? The company uses tristructural isotopic particle fuel that you can have all the fuel you want, but you don't even have a reactor. For systems that don't exist, you don't have applications into the regulatory agencies, let alone an actual license to build one. And each particle is made up of a uranium, carbon, and oxygen fuel kernel. Uranium, really. More like mixed oxide fuel. Prior to that role, she spent a year as a licensing manager at BWX Technologies. You got any idea how evil they actually are? A company focused on the supply of nuclear fuel and fuel channel components and equipment. These are scumbags. She has a long legacy of working for degenerate scumbags. I looked up a picture of her, and surprise, 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 there's no pictures of her. Ain't that... Why wouldn't you have a picture if she's so such a fine, upstanding citizen? Oh, that's right, because she's not. The company uses tri-structural isotopic particle fuel, trisol, for its systems. First off, you don't have a reactor for your systems, you piece of shit. You disgusting parasite. You burden on humanity. Your parents should be arrested for not drowning you when you were born. She also worked at the utility Tennessee Valley Authorities for 4 years and a year and a half at the small modular reactor company Nuke that just built, and she just got fired or laid off from there, that stole over almost $5 billion from United States taxpayers and who knows how much from investors. Didn't even try to build a reactor. That's her credentials. Guess what she's going to be doing? And over 7 years, energy services company, the DTE Energy, where she worked at the Fermi 2 nuclear power plant. She worked at Fermi 2, which melted down, which is a sodium reactor. They call it a partial meltdown. It's a meltdown. There's no such thing as a partial meltdown. It's a meltdown. It suffered a meltdown when the flow of sodium, like Savannah River or Santa Susana, which released 460 times more, they say, than 3 Mile Island did to cover it up. And now 500,000 people have built their homes within 10 miles of that ongoing disease factory. Right, where Rocketdyne used to test all their rocket engines, right? So you would never want to live in that. And there's not a street there where almost every kid doesn't have cancer. You got a million excuses for why they're so evil. The one thing about Archie is, though, she's evil. Nuclear phase-out, strike again. Why are they always surrounded by farms? Why so evil if you're not evil? Well, there has been some good news in the U.S. recently, nuclear power issues. Yeah, really? What was that again? Oh, that's right, there isn't. Including a partial removal of the Illinois nuclear ban. Why is that good news? So there's 25 states with no bans and still not building reactors there. Why would this one be any different? Just because you removed the ban, which because you have to have politicians in your pocket, that don't mean you're going to build reactors. The last reactor you built took 30 years. The same cannot be said of Spain, where the future for nuclear is looking bleak. Before July 2023 elections, leaders of the Popular Party promised to reverse the country's nuclear phase-out policy, saying it will be a policy of my government, his administration, to reverse the planned decommissioning and extend the life of our nuclear disease factories. It's like, first off, like the ratepayers paid enough money and is taken off their bills every month to go into a special fund to build a replacement facility for any decommissioned energy system, right? The money's already there. So the only reason you want to keep that nuclear reactor is because you stole the money? There's already located to build something to replace it, something sensible. Not like small... Why are we talking about small modular reactors that don't exist every single day, folks? Acknowledge the difficulty of losing more than 1/5 of the country's generation capacity. But there is no difficulty. You had the money to build something to replace it before you fucking shut it off. Sorry. I thought I was talking to him in person that time. That same week, the Ministry for Ecological Transitions announced 150 million euros in subsidies for 904 megawatt of energy storage projects to be co-located at solar and wind facilities. An announcement is part of a broader commitment to build renewables and storage. These people are disgusting every time you look at them. Oh, a golf gala supporting nuclear medicine. Really? A golf gala to support nuclear medicine. Really? I think nuclear medicine genocides days should be over. Hang on. Bear with me. Let me introduce you to radiation therapy so you can appreciate what happens when they stick fucking radiation into your loved ones. There's a lot of good stories to read there. We're not going to get through all of them because it's unbelievable how much of this stuff I actually have. Introduction to radiation injuries, another silent epidemic. Radiation injuries. Radiation-induced injuries. So you go into the hospital because you got cancer. Well, we can't do nothing for your child. Can't do nothing for your husband. We can't do nothing for your aunt, your uncle, your grandfather, your twin. We can't do nothing for anybody. Well, come on, please, doctor. You got to do something for him. Well, there is radiation therapy. You got to sign a piece of paper so you can't sue us. And we can only spend $900,000 taxpayers' money on you. And then if we don't make it, then that's the best we can do. Well, please, doctor, do something for my loved one. So let me show you what happens to the victims. So they go in and they get beam therapy, whatever you want to call it, from the gamma machines and radiation machines, neutron machines. And they just blast you with fucking radiation in the sieverts. There's no way you're going to survive. They kill every cell in your friggin' body. But here's what happens to your body. So say they reduce that particular tumor. Guess what happens after? You got radiation-induced injuries to your eyeballs, radiation injuries to your heart to deal with. You got cardiac injuries following treatment for breast cancer with radiation-induced cardiac injuries, radiation-induced kidney injuries, hypoxia from radiation, chronic radiation-induced lung injuries, blood-spinal cord barrier disruption, central nervous system's radiation injuries, radiation-induced lung injuries, radiation-induced bowel injuries. Then they're going to do laser treatments of severe radiation injuries, lower intestinal tracts. Radiation-induced kidney injuries, did I mention that? Breast radiation injury litigation because they destroyed so many women's. I know there was 10 million women had their breast removed that didn't even have breast cancer. Remember that? We covered that a number of years back. Central nervous system radiation injuries. Sounds like fun, don't it? Quite the party. Lots of money for the nuclear industry. Repeat customers like this are pretty good. Injuries to the cranial nerves. Nuclides following protein beam radiation therapy. Radiation injuries to the head and necks. The assessment of radiation-induced brain injuries, brain necrosis. Radiation-induced regional lung injuries, small bowels radiation injuries. You got 95 radiation-related breast injuries, radiation-induced intestinal syndromes. Vitamin C uptake may save lives after a radiation accident. Vitamin C uptake. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. It's disgusting what you do there, isn't it? Radiation-induced normal tissue. It's normal. There's normal injuries from radiation. Oh, my favorite, radiation-induced rectal injuries. Spinal cord recovery from radiation injuries. Radiation injuries to the aorta and the heart branch arteries. Patient with radiation-induced bowel injuries. Radiation injuries of the central nervous system. Radiation rectal injuries. Lung injuries. Your gland injuries from radiation, liver diseases from radiation, radiation bile duct injuries. So you go in to get pounded with radiation and you get 8 or 9 or 10 of these things over the next couple of months showing up. Acute brain radiation injuries. And they know it. The question is why, they've done studies on radio chemotherapy where they use radiation and chemotherapy at the same time. And the study's been repeated. The question is only 2% survival 5 years or more. And the quality of life is completely destroyed once you go in and get radiation injury. Because to do all of this, you got to kill every cell in the body. And then you got to hope and pray that you recover, that your cells Like, it's absurd to kill every cell in your body and suggest that that's somehow therapy. That's fucking therapy. I'll give you a fucking therapy that catches any of you. Radiation-induced brain injury after proton radiotherapy. Have you fucking murderers. Modification radiation-induced brain injuries. Brain stem injury after intense modulator radiation. Intense radiation therapy. Intense radiation therapy. Like, to put the word therapy in any of this is despicable. Like, you really truly got to be a degenerate monster to put the word therapy in any of this. Do you get language decline after brain radiation therapy? Radiation-induced brain injuries after radioactive of the brain. Recurrent brain tumors from radiation injuries. Recurrent brain tumors from radiation injuries. Radiation. There's so many studies in radioactive brain injuries. It's unbelievable how many different studies out there. Clinical approaches to reduce radiation brain injuries, radiation-induced brain injuries, radiation brain tumor progression from radiation injuries after cranial irradiation. These are fucking monsters. I apologize, I can't contain it sometimes. Ionizing radiation-induced brain injury, radiation-induced brain injury, radiation-induced normal brain injury. What the fuck is that, I wonder? Test battery for the assessment of radiation-induced brain injury. Did I mention the word brain, radiation-induced brain injury tonight? I can't remember. Mitigating radiation-induced brain necrosis. You do it by not letting your loved ones be fucking murdered by these scumbags. I'm going to have to stop it because I'm starting to get upset. I get upset. I can't get through all of them. Holy fuck. I can't even scroll through all of them. Nothing says scumbag like nuclear. There really isn't. They're just scum. There's no other way to describe them. They're degenerate scum. Everything in the industry knows what they're doing. There's no illusions. I don't have any fucking illusions. See, I'm not even fit to do the rest of the show now. Because this pisses me off so much. We'll pick it up tomorrow night. Might as well end on a bang. I gotta cover this story. China's nuclear drones can fly forever. Nuclear fucking fallout drones everywhere. Without needing to land or power up. Well, that's the same company who's going to build telephones that are powered for 50 years. Does anybody out there think they're going to have their phone in 50 years? Is there anybody? And they say they're going to take back all the batteries. Well, you better not send them any of them over to Africa or anywhere else. So how many of them you got to crack open to make a dirty bomb, I wonder? Beijing-based startup Betavolt Technology claims to have developed a battery that could enable devices like smartphones to operate indefinitely without recharging or drones to fly without landing. They're going to start mass producing it later on this year, they say. They adjusted their story from last week because we beat the shit out of them. They claimed that the nuclear-powered BV-100, which is smaller than a coin, can provide power for 50 years without the need for recharging. And that the prototype battery harnesses energy released by nuclear isotopes and uses semiconductors to convert that energy into electrical power. I think you're talking about 62 isotopes will power your phone. Think how fucked up that actually is. You know how easy it is to ingest 62 isotopes when you're drinking water or eating food? It can power a phone for 50 years, but it can't hurt you. Really? It could be used in military applications, really. What are you, fucking stupid or something? Yeah, I'm sorry, folks. I should pick up on this story tomorrow night because there's no way I'm going to make it through it without losing my mind again. So they're going to use nickel 63. Where's it to? Yeah, nickel 63. Which has a 100-year half-life, which means it takes 1,000 years to decay. And you're going to put that in people's phones? You pieces of shit. You're disgusting maggots, man. Russia's next nuclear icebreaker will be named the Leningrad. Do you remember what they done with the Lenin nuclear submarine? They took the 3 reactor cores from the icebreaker Lenin and dropped it in the ocean, into the Arctic. Or the Antarctic, I can't remember now. In 1967. So it takes 1,000 years to decay. I'm not going to make it through the rest because I'm upset with all those medical studies. They always upset me. Don't matter, we're 2 hours and 50 minutes in anyway, so we'll call it a night. Less chance of me wigging out. Not 100% chance, but when you look at these studies, like it's so incomprehensible that they would continue to do it, and they know, they have no illusions about what's happening to the victims in the hospitals. Like they have no illusions, and they keep doing it. The Canadians are really bad because they'll take your child if they have diagnosed of cancer, and they'll force the child to get radiation. And Americans too. They'll take the child. The police will come and take your child. They'll bring them to the hospital, and they'll put a guard there to keep everybody away, and they'll radiate the living fuck out of that child till it's almost dead. And when the child is dying, they'll send it home to die. That's when the parents will get to see it again. It vexes me to no end. It tears my heart apart. It destroys me. Every time I cover that. It wrecks my fucking soul. And it's a good thing because the truth is never bad. The truth is never bad. We're going to close the poll out. What did the fucking disgusting Japan and the despicable evil UN, International Atomic Energy Agency, hide a nuclear fuel pool meltdown again? And I showed you the evidence that they've done it repeatedly many times in Japan. Multiple reactors that have lost the fuel pools. They've hid that away successfully now for 12 years. Over almost 13 years. Big shout out to Sue, who donated another $300. Sue, my goodness. Thank you so much. Excellent timing, by the way. Trying to end the poll there. It's going to do the same thing as last night, is it? Where it blinks out on me. So hugs for Sue. Thank you, Sue Spain. Sprain. I apologize. I'm going to butcher everybody's name tonight. Once I get upset, it's downhill for me after. Hugs for everybody. Bless everybody. Thank you, everybody. Dan and Asana said it right. US and Canada, too, are all scumbags. Thanks, Dana. Let's shut it down. I'm so upset now. I just want to sit here and start yelling. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to be doing that. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. Hi, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Thank you, everybody. See everybody tomorrow night. We'll pick up where I screwed up tonight. And we had almost 60 votes on the poll. Thank you. 54 likes on the video. And it'll be interesting to see how many views I got on the video after the show is over, because they always rob me. We'll have screen capture tomorrow night. I forgot to cover them tonight. Let's play a closeout song. And we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Tuesday. For, these shows are 24-hour news cycles typically. We're covering Japan's earthquake because we have a lot of convincing evidence that the fuel pool at the Shika nuclear power plant has melted down. And if that's the case, 22 days later, the entire planet is already buried in that radioactive fallout. We know they covered up Fukushima's reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 fuel pool meltdowns. Don't think for 1 second that they won't do it again. That's a big mistake. We're trying to flush it out, and the evidence is pretty overwhelming. It's frightening. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. See everybody tomorrow night. Have a great day tomorrow, folks. We'll see you real soon. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you can make it this far. Take care, folks.